As far as delays go, I've always been a big fan of more vintage sounding, dark, gritty, imperfect delays, shall we say. And I think one of the coolest delays that we have in the Helix, and I am absolutely shocked to look back through all of my videos and see that I never did a proper dialing in video for this, and I had a recent request to do it, so here we are. It is the incredible Cosmos Echo, which is a model of the Roland RE-201 Space Echo. Very interesting delay, capable of some very interesting results. And it can also be a little overwhelming and confusing if we don't fully understand what all of the many parameters do. So today we're going to clear all that up. Come with me over to HX Edit and let's make sure we know how to dial this in to get the best results, because there's some really cool tones hidden inside of here. So here we are over in HX Edit. We have a little preset I made very quickly based off of the template I always use, a little bit of LA Studio comp at the end, a parametric EQ, which is only being used for low and high cut. I got a touch of dynamic room reverb on here like I always do. Low and high shelf, typical settings for me, both low and high frequencies set at 650 Hertz, low frequencies dialed back by 2 dB, and the high frequencies are plus 2 dB. I chose the wonderful Rev Gen Purple amp model to demonstrate this through a 412 Greenback 25. I did not spend much time dialing this in, just more to give us a tone that will demonstrate the delay. All right, if I turn the Cosmos Echo off, we get this for the tone. Okay, works for our demonstration of this delay. Now, if I turn the Cosmos Echo on, here are the parameters we have to worry about. We have note sync, ramp, feedback, wow and flutter, mix, level, headroom, this mode control, which is a source of much confusion for some folks. We have bass treble, FB tone, splice, dry through, spread, and trail. So let's dive right in and figure out what all of these do. Okay, so starting at the top, note sync is going to be like just about any other delay. In the Helix, if we turn that to the time feature, we can have anywhere from 150 milliseconds all the way up to 2 full seconds before we get our delayed repeats. For anybody who watches my videos knows I like to keep these set to note sync. We'll keep it there for now. Ramp is going to be interesting. We're going to come back to this in just a second. Let's go through the more common functions. Feedback, again, is just going to be how many repeats we get from our echo. You notice set at 0, we get 1. And set at 100 on this, this is going to go into self-oscillation mode. As we see very easily, I didn't even play anything. It was already just going off of the noise of my fingers on the strings. But even if we go up around 80, those repeats start feeding back over top of one another. The wow and flutter is going to be a very common feature on a lot of these vintage tape delays as well. It's just basically going to be the imperfections of the tape itself, giving some weird pitch and warbly effects to it. So if we have our wow and flutter on 0 versus on 10, you can hear a much less stable on our repeats. Mix is going to be like normal. If we have it on 0, we get nothing but our dry signal. No delay repeats. If we have it on 100, no dry signal and only our delayed repeats. And in around the 50% mark, we're going to have pretty close to an equal volume balance between our dry unaffected notes and our repeats. All right, our level control is just going to be our final output level of the effect, really not a big part of the tone here. Headroom, again, is just going to be a control that's built into some of these Helix delays, which is actually kind of cool. If we find that maybe we're hitting the input of this delay with too much signal and it's maybe clipping this in a way we don't want and distorting it, we can use the headroom control to add just that, some headroom to it. We're not really going to be touching that too much today, but that is a very useful control in the right situation. We're going to come back to the mode because that's another parameter unique to the Cosmos Echo. Bass and treble are going to be the overall EQ just for our delayed repeats, though. This is not going to affect our dry signal. So if I play a note, crank the bass up, You hear the delayed repeats have a much fatter sound, or I could bring these all the way down and really thin those repeats up. But what it doesn't do is affect the direct tone that I have. And that's easy to hear by going to the mix control, bring it down to 0. You hear that there's no difference if I use these EQ controls on the dry signal. So we can bring that back up there and we can alter this quite dramatically on our affected repeats, as you can hear there. Now, FB tone is one that confuses a lot of folks. This is going to basically control all of the repeats after the first repeat. So if you listen to what I'm playing here, you kind of hear how all the repeats kind of had a similar EQ to them. But if I bring this down to 0, you're going to hear the first repeat of the delayed repeats, or the echoes. It's going to be a little bit brighter and the others are going to darken up. Right, so that's going to be different, because if I cranked, let's say, my bass down to 0, my treble up all the way, and I have my FB tone on 10, I'm going to get very thin, grainy repeats. But if I bring the FB tone down to 0, my first echo is going to be kind of high-endy and grainy, but my other ones will darken up. And I hope you noticed that. I hope that that was clear. So that's an interesting control. I like these controls because we can really just fine-tune things a little bit. The Splice feature we'll come back to in a second. That's a little bit of an odd one, very unique to the Cosmos Echo as well. Dry through is going to be a very subtle effect, and it can actually be a little bit confusing because people turn it on and off and don't really hear what it's going to do. It seems self-explanatory. It sounds like it's going to let the dry signal run through. With the dry through off, we basically have all of our dry signal being affected by the electronics of the delay. So whatever coloration the electronics of the Cosmos Echo is going to bring in to our direct signal, we are going to hear that on the other end, although it's going to be subtle. So even if I have dry through on, allowing the dry signal to come through, you'll notice my mix control kind of just works the same way. Same as if I have it off. And you might think the dry through would change whether the mix control could allow all our dry through. Now, I guess the point here is that if we are on 0 where we have no echoes, the dry through off is basically not going to allow any dry through to be mixed in with the signal that is being altered by the internal electronics of the Cosmos Echo. So I would think that with the dry through off, we're probably going to maybe just darken the tone up a touch. But really not going to be a huge difference. Let's just leave the dry through off just to kind of get the full effect of what the Cosmos Echo onboard electronics is going to do to our tone. Spread is going to give us more stereo spread, really going to be noticeable with the wow and flutter. If I put the wow and flutter on 10 and play, you can hear those tape imperfections and warbliness essentially in mono. But there you should be able to hear them kind of move around a little bit more width in the stereo spectrum. Okay, now let's come back to the controls that we kind of skipped over. I'm going to actually set this over to time for a moment. And actually, we can keep this down to 150 milliseconds. And I am going to assign this to an expression pedal too. What the ramp control is going to do, it's going to determine how quickly the time effect is going to ramp up to the new time as we alter it. So if I have, as we can see here, my expression pedal tied to the time control, if I play a note with the ramp on 0, let's listen to what that does. You'll hear how it very quickly zooms up to its new time. But if I put the ramp control on 10, even if I zoom the time up from 150 milliseconds all the way to 2 seconds, it takes a little time for it to ramp up to that speed because we've told it to do so. With the ramp on 0, we hear it just kind of zooms up to that. So that can be an interesting control, but the thing about it is if I was to just unassign that to the expression pedal, go back to our quarter note, changing the ramp, and I'll bring my feedback control back up here. Isn't going to have any effect unless we are altering the note sync or the time here. So that can be a confusing feature simply because we go, well, it's really not doing anything. We'll just leave it on 0, I guess. But it can be useful if we are going to use an expression pedal or a foot switch to maybe switch between different note sync or time values on our Echo. Coming down to mode now, this is one of the most interesting things. The way that the Roland RE-201 Space Echo worked is basically it was a unit with a free flowing loop of audio tape going through it with a point where that tape was spliced together. It wasn't on a reel, it was just moving through a large area within the unit. The way a tape echo works is that it records onto that tape on a record head, and then at some interval after it, it plays back what it just recorded. And then it comes back around again. So the Space Echo had 3 different playback heads. So it would record whatever you played on the record head, and then it could potentially play back the audio on 1, 2, or all 3, or some combination, as we see here in the Cosmos Echo, of those different play heads. So I hope that's clear. So basically, our note sync might be set to a quarter note, but depending on the setting we have down here in our mode, we may not be getting that quarter note echo, if that makes sense. So how can we get the quarter note echo? Well, by using tape head number 3. That is going to give us our nice solid quarter note repeat. Then it's going to start dividing that time by 3. So if we go down to the 2 play head, you'll hear how now we're not getting that quarter note anymore. It's sped up faster. And down here on the 1 setting, you know, the faster we're almost getting like a slapback or almost like a reverberation if I brought that feedback down low. This is why I said this is really one of the more interesting echoes inside of the Helix, because we don't necessarily have to use it as sort of a traditional delay. We could actually get some really cool reverberation effects from it as well. Almost a modulated reverb there. And something that we have control over the tone. So very interesting stuff as far as that goes, but very important to understand what that playhead is actually doing. So if we come back to 3, and back to the quarter note setting, there's our quarter note. 2. Now we can also combine 1 and 3 to kind of get some of that reverb type effect with the normal quarter note we set. Now that might sound overwhelming because we have the mix set quite high, but if I brought that back to a more reasonable mix, so if you want to use it just as a more kind of traditional delay, just with the cool coloration of what the Cosmos Echo gives us, head number 3 would be perfect for that. But we can also get some cool effects by combining different combinations. So as you can see, some pretty cool effects, and really I can't tell you what to set that on. It's really going to be up to what you are chasing tone-wise. If we were to set this at just the mode 3 to get more of a standard delay, I would probably have the WoW and Flutter somewhere at a medium setting. My mix, maybe somewhere around 38. Feedback's going to be to taste, but I usually like it not too crazy, maybe down in the mid-20s. With the FB tone, I would likely bring that down quite a ways. Bass, maybe crank that up a bit, pull the treble back a little bit. I really like what that does. We could also go with a 1 and 3 setting like that. So we can really color our tone up quite nicely. Now, the other thing you might ask about is splice. Now, as I mentioned before, the Space Echo is a loop of tape that basically had to have a point where the two pieces were spliced together. When that splice point finally works its way through the whole system and crosses the playhead that we are listening to, it's going to give us a weird little audio glitch that we may or may not like. So the fine folks at Line 6 were really smart about the way they implemented this. If we have splice on 0, we don't get that at all. If we have it on 10, we get a very dramatic version of that imperfection. Now, the best way to show this is if I crank my feedback up to, let's say, 80. So we go into this sort of feedback oscillation that you can already hear coming in. Maybe I'll just go up to 75 or so. And I'm going to play, and I will have the splice up all the way and listen for a really crazy, wacky thing. You might have just heard it in the background there. Did you hear it? That's pretty extreme, but every so often that's going to come around. That symbolizes when that splice point crosses the playhead that we're using. So you'll hear that come around every so often. Now, that might be really annoying to some. Let's see if we can hear it again. there it is again. So what happens if, and it takes so long to come around again, but let's lower that to 4. There it was again. Sorry it's taking so long. You gotta listen to these weird space noises. But what happens if we bring that down to a much lower setting of 1.5, and we'll see if it's as noticeable. But really nice that we can dial it into the amount we want. Did you hear that? Much more subtle. So actually a pretty cool addition, and I'm really glad they gave the ability to allow us to choose whether we want more or less of that imperfection. But I think a really great move to add that in, just in case we want to do something really zany, and the ability to control it is very, very cool. What do you guys think? Do you see now why I kind of alluded to the fact that I think this just may be one of the coolest delay effects we have in the Helix? I think the folks at Line 6 did a really great job emulating a lot of the quirks of the original unit, especially with that splice control, the ability to control the different playback heads we use to really get some other very, very cool effects. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope that at least opened your eyes to what's possible with the Cosmos Echo. And hopefully you'll go back and maybe revisit it and use it in a way now that you're going to be able to dial in what you really want out of it. So thank you guys so much again for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Please like the video and share it with anybody who you think would get some use out of watching it. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. I'll be back really soon with some more. Thank you guys again so much for sharing your time with me. Ciao for now.